everyone.
Hi,
It's Callista.
and Stephanie.
We're back for our final week of Q&A, kind of like lightning round Q&A. This week, we are going to be doing a metallic discussion.
Yes, and today is actually our last session of Thread Happy Hour. So if you've been tuning in every week this month for National Sewing Month, thank you so much. We decided to choose metallic thread as our topic of choice this month because I know so many people have questions on how to use it, or maybe people feel nervous about it, but we're here to hopefully dispel some myths, explain to you some thread science, and help you use metallic thread by hand or by machine more easily.
Yeah, especially going into the holiday season, it's a good time to kind of like cap the month off by talking about metallics, and it is the topic that comes with the most amount of questions that we get asked. So if you guys have any questions, like always, feel free to pop it into the chat. We've already kind of accumulated a bunch of questions that we are going to be working off of from previous, but like I said, you're welcome to ask us anything at any point. It's kind of like an open forum, these happy hour Q&As. So
yeah, grab some tea, grab a drink, and then you can sit down, and we like before, we have some questions that some of you have already submitted regarding metallic threads. We'll be reading off of here, and any questions that pop up in your mind, just feel free to type them in, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat.
Yes. So without further ado, let's go into question 1. Why does metallic thread always shred at the needle? So this kind of this does happen pretty commonly. So I would say when you are using metallic, you always want to use a larger needle eye because there is risk of the thread kind of shredding sometimes. And I think what people experience is like the metallic wrapping kind of gets pulled off the thread, and you get like a little bit of like white thread left at the end. And that's how metallic thread is made. If you look at an enlarged picture of metallic, is kind of like if you have like a rope and then you have some ribbon wrapping around that rope, and that is that metallic foil that's kind of covering the thread. Now, if you have a core or a metallic that has a bit of stretch in the middle, and actually a lot of them do have a little bit because a lot of people use a polyester, or a lot of companies use a polyester core for the center of the thread. So that increases the risk of the thread just stretching a little. And when that happens, that wrapping opens up a little and becomes very catchy, especially at a very sharp turn, kind of like at your needle eye. So it's very easy for it to catch there and shred all the metallic back. So we at WonderFil use a Rayon-Core metallic. So rayon does not stretch at all, so it makes the thread a little bit more supple and soft, and it's about the sewability of the thread. So the rayon is going to help the metallic sew better and reduce problems like the shredding. So for one, why does it shred? It has a higher chance to shred because of just how metallic thread is made. But to prevent more shredding, I definitely recommend not picking a metallic that might have like a stretchy core, like the Rayon-Core metallic that we have, and using a larger eyed needle as well.
Yeah, so I think when, again, like what Calista was saying, when you are shopping for rayon, or when you're shopping for metallic, make sure it has that rayon core. And in addition to rayon not being stretchy, it's also much softer as a material. So I think one thing you'll notice, and what we try to explain to people about metallic thread and why it is tricky to use in your machine, is metallic has the best thread memory out of all different materials. So when you pull out a strand of cotton thread, it basically relaxes right away. And that's why cotton thread is so easy to use in your machine and to use for quilting and piecing. However, when we compare cotton thread to metallic thread, so we have a spool right here to show you. Right here. So I think this may be a common experience if you've used metallic before, and you can already see. So one, it comes off the spool really easily, and you can see right there it's already actually twisted up twice, and that's because the thread is keeping the memory of the shape of the spool that it was wound on. So what we need to do is have those considerations of what it's made of. So depending on how you use the thread and how it feeds into your machine will actually impact the tension and things like that too. So as you can see, I've already pulled this part out. It's going to relax much faster than if it had like a polyester core because rayon is so much softer. So back to the original question of why it's shredding in the needle. One is yes, if there's that stretchy core, it's going to, those like strands, that wrapping Calista talked about, it's going to open up and then catch in the sharpest turn of your sewing, your thread path, right?
Yeah, right at the needle eye.
Right at the needle eye. And that's where it's going to snap. And then that explains also what Calista was saying earlier. It's like you get, what you're left with is like almost all this like metallic material kind of splayed out with maybe like a white fuzzy core. And that might be like the polyester core that's stretched and then the metallic caught and snapped. So that's one element of why that might be happening at the needle. But while we're on that topic.
Yeah, the next question is actually, do I need a special needle for metallic? So the answer is you do need to make sure, especially when you're sewing with metallics, that you have the right size needle. It's not really a special needle that you need. There are metallic needles, but you can also just use a top stitch needle. So this is like something that we have here. For example, like this Schmetz top stitch 9014 needle. That is kind of like the size that we would recommend for sewing with metallic thread. Now we're talking about sewing with a metallic thread that kind of looks like the one that we have here.
This is a 40 weight metallic.
So this is like typically the metallic thread that you might be thinking of. We also have metallic thread that has kind of like a, it's more actually like a rayon twisted with metallic that looks something like this. Now this size of thread is actually heavier. This is going to be a 12 weight thread called GlaMore. And so if you're using a thread like this, then I would actually go up in needle size and use a 116 needle. Now, the top stitch needle and the metallic needle are actually pretty much the same type of needle.
Yeah.
The difference that you find with top stitch is that it actually just has like a larger needle eye, and that extra space just helps with the metallic thread.
So even when it comes to different techniques on your machine, having that needle, either the top stitch 9014 or the 116 if you're using like a bigger thread, is going to be extremely important for your success rate in sewing with it. So whether it's just like simple top stitching or embroidery or even free motion quilting on your long arm, you want to make sure you either have the metallic needle or that top stitch 9014. And this is information we got from Schmetz, the needle company, that those needles are interchangeable, the top stitch 9014 and that metallic.
Exactly. Okay, now the next question is, my metallic thread curls and tangles, why? So this is going back to what Stephanie said, and this is kind of a characteristic of metallic thread, is that what the thread has a really good memory. So when it comes off the spool, it kind of remembers its curl, and you can see that here. Whereas with like cotton thread, it has the worst thread memory. So when it comes off the spool, it's almost entirely straightened out, and that is just a characteristic of cotton, or sorry, of the metallic. There's nothing we can actually do about it wanting to be this curly shape, but you can deal with it after it comes off the spool by using something that's kind of like our ultimate thread dispenser here. And I would also say, because of this characteristic, I would avoid putting metallic on the horizontal spool pin. So
we always say that there's a price on pretty, and that's definitely true when it comes to metallic thread. So how this little device works is it's actually kind of like a lazy Susan for your thread. So it's actually, hopefully you can see on the camera, it's actually unspooling the thread, because the ultimate thread dispenser is actually spinning the thread. So Calista is able to draw it out with even tension and preventing pooling and tangling of the thread. And this allows the thread to relax a lot more. Now, if you have a thread stand that's also gonna already help with the whole relaxing thing, because we're trying to feed the thread very evenly into the machine. We're trying to achieve good tension.
Yeah.
So a thread stand can also work to help relax that thread by bringing it up and over. The reason why we show the ultimate thread dispenser first is because it's actually unwinding your thread into the machine. If
the thread is essentially coming off the machine the same way it was wound.
Coming off the thread.
Or coming off the thread. So then like you're not adding extra twist into the thread as it gets pulled off.
Yes. Whereas if you have it on a thread stand and the thread is coming off the top of the spool, you're still inducing an extra twist, right? Every time it comes off the top. So while it does help the success rate of it not twisting up and pooling and stuff like that, the ultimate thread dispenser, or what we call the UTD, is really going to help unspool that thread and even out that tension. And that's why it's like very popular for people that are doing like free motion quilting or embroidery.
Yes. Yeah. And we have a question from Brandis here. How do I keep the ends of my metallic thread from blossoming? So I'm assuming you're saying kind of like the end of the thread is kind of like looking a little bit fuzzy, or like the twist might be coming apart. So I would definitely say a handy tool would be to use a product kind of like a thread wrap when you are not sewing with the thread. So it's just not dancing around in like a box, or I don't know how you have your thread typically, but we do sell like sheets like this. This is called WonderGuard, and it is a great way to just kind of like keep your spools neat. So you kind of just, well, actually I'll show you one thing, is you wrap it around when you're not using it tightly so the thread doesn't come unspooled. Obviously I would wrap this end in if I wasn't going to show you the next part. But the next part is you can also loosen this up. If you don't have something like the ultimate thread dispenser, you can use this. This is kind of like 2-in-1. And you can still sew with it while the wrap is on the spool. So it helps also just like from pooling and things like that. But if you're just kind of like storing the thread, then I would definitely maybe put something like this so it's just not floating
unraveling
around.
And then your outside threads become looser, or blossoming, I think is what.
Oh yes, right. It could mean that, like that the thread is just kind of coming off the spool
a little
pooling.
Loosely.
So I would definitely look at something like this thread wrap when you aren't sewing, so then it like kind of keeps it all together.
And I would add too, the reason why we're using something like this, so it sticks to itself, and there's nothing grippy or any sort of extra friction on it. So we recommend this instead of a thread net, because I know many people might be comparing this to something like a thread net. However, if you think about sewing with the thread net, all the thread that's drawing from the top of the spool is going to have a lot looser tension than when the thread is drawing from the bottom. So it'll be a lot more friction, and then it'll be loose, and then it'll be loose, and then a lot more friction. So that's how it's drawing off your spool as you sew with it. And again, we're really trying to even out the tension that goes into your project, right?
And also just like while your thread is like on a shelf or in a box or something like that, a thread net is actually not going to like have as much support, because it just kind of like loosely keeps it together, but it still has opportunity to like expand. But if you have something like this, you can actually wrap it up like very tight, and there's like no chance of like the thread
unspooling,
dropping off, or unspooling. You can see, and like I'll kind of like jostle it in my hand. But if it was like in a bag or something like that, you can see that.
And also, if you do choose to sew with this, it's going to be a lot less catchy too than a thread net. So those are kind of the three main tools. So to just go over it again, this one is the ultimate thread dispenser. It comes in 3 colors. There's pink, white, and blue. So we have the blue one right here. This is called the thread tamer. This is the WonderFil thread stand.
Yes.
And then, of course, this is Wonder Guard. So that's what we've put on here. And it comes in 2 sizes. This is the one for the standard size spool. And for any of you guys that do a lot of handwork, we do have mini Wonder Guards as well. So if you're using Dazzle or any of these like slippery metallic rayon threads, you can also wrap it with that.
Yes. Okay, so next question is, should I put metallic thread in the bobbin? So no, you should not put metallic thread in the bobbin. I know a lot of people think that you should match the same thread top and in the bobbin, but that is, I would say, a myth we're going to dispel. You do not need to match your top thread to your bobbin thread. When you do embroidery, or when you use metallic thread in general, there's a high chance you're also using it in embroidery or decorative stitches and things like that. And you don't want to add more bulk than you need for what your metallic has to go through, because it already is, I'd say, a little bit more sensitive of a thread, because if you think about it, like we said, it has like that wrapping on it, and like you don't want to kind of like have a lot of like friction or kind of wear on the thread as it goes up and down through the fabric so much. So you want to reduce the bulk where you can. And so especially if you're doing embroidery and you have like a lot of stitches, by using a lighter weight bobbin thread, then you can reduce some of the bulk that metallic and that needle have to go up and down through. And so we always recommend using a lighter weight bobbin thread with the metallic, like our 80 weight Deco Bob.
Yes. So I know almost every talk this month, we always bring up Deco Bob.
Yeah.
But the reason why we recommend it is because this lightweight thread is going to just, first of all, really help with tensioning, because it's a pre-wound. So it's factory wound, so it's completely even as it's being wound.
Yes.
When you wind it on your domestic machine, sometimes you're going to have some variability in the tension. And again, I know ring word is kind of like tension here, but because this is factory wound, it's going to be as even as your factory wound spool, right?
Yes.
So your tension is already going to be way easier to balance.
Yep.
And then on the other hand, like what Calista said, your work will stay lightweight and flexible, and it's not going to have a lot of bulk or a lot of thread at the back. It'll look nice and clean. So this is why we recommend pre-wound bobbins, and specifically lightweight pre-wounds like Deco Bob. That's going to help you immensely when you're using metallic thread. So when we do our talks, when people ask us questions about troubleshooting, literally, like we covered this earlier, but needle and bobbin thread is going to be like one of your most important factors when you're sewing with this thread.
And we're not getting in like super detailed. We're just kind of like answering these questions. But we actually did a metallic thread talk maybe like 2 years ago or something. That it's on our YouTube channel. I think I talked about metallic thread for like an hour and a half. It is quite extensive. So if you're looking to sew with metallic, or you want more information beyond like some of these like just like FAQ questions, then I would definitely go check out that video, because we definitely dive deeper into things and show a few more examples.
Yes.
So this is not a question related to metallic thread, but there's a fun question that we will kind of take here, which is, who came up with the name Deco Bob? I smile every time I say it. So that would be the president of our company. I think he always tries to think of like a unique name for our thread. So as you can see, we don't typically just go, this is a cotton 50 weight, or this is a 40 weight tri-level polyester. We have like Fruity and Tootie and Polyfast. And that's exactly why we come up with these names, because hopefully it does bring a smile to your face, and it's a little bit more memorable because it's like maybe a bit silly.
Yeah, and I think the roots of Deco Bob is, on the one hand side, you use it for a lot of your decorative stuff, right? So quilting, even when you're doing like your piecing, your embroidery, and then Bob as in like bobbin. So Deco Bob / bobbin is literally what all our pre-wounds are wound with. And that's my interpretation of Deco Bob, because it's like literally in most of our projects, because it's always going to be the bobbin thread. So Deco
Yes.
Bobbin, kind of.
Yeah. Okay, so back to some of the other questions we have is, my thread keeps spilling off the spool. How do I fix that? So I don't know if you're talking about, I don't know whoever asked this question is talking about if it's spilling off the spool when they're sewing or when they're just storing the thread. Like we mentioned, when you're storing the thread, you can use something like this Wonder Guard. But if you're talking about the thread pooling while you're doing your sewing or things like that, I would definitely recommend, first of all, not putting it on the horizontal spool pin, because the thread is a bit slicker. Even if you're buying like a high quality metallic, the thread is just naturally a little bit more slippery. And so when the thread is drawing off the spool, when it's placed on the horizontal spool pin, it just naturally has a higher chance of like dropping extra thread. And I'll just kind of like demonstrate here. It's like, you can see it kind of like, you see that? I'm just pulling a little, and then when it gets to top, it drops more. So it's just like, it's not feeding the exact amount I'm pulling, because it just, you see,
Giving you
it's just
more.
giving me more. So that's one reason why I don't like to use metallic in the horizontal spool pin, and I would advise against that. Drawing it vertically will help with some of that, but using tools like what we mentioned earlier, like the Ultimate Thread Dispenser or like a thread stand, where it can just kind of like help hold and guide the thread a little bit more. You can see it only takes, and it doesn't really drop, it only takes what I'm kind of asking it to, right? And it's not pooling here, and it's not dropping extra thread. So if you're really experiencing quite a lot of issues with that, I would definitely invest in some tools. I think when it does come to metallic, I do think it helps to have some extra tools available in your sewing room that just kind of make it a little bit easier to get the threads going.
Yes. And if you have a spool that looks similar to like this is what we call our cop size. So this and this are the same thread. The thread line is actually called Spotlite, but there are different sizes. If this is the spool that you have, it's not going to sit on this the same way. So part of the thread stand we have here is it has this little attachment that you can slide on and slide off. What you can do, and this is the only time that we actually do put it horizontally, is that we put the pin through the spool like so. Then we slide it onto our thread stand. So let me just do that right here. And then you guide the thread up through here, and then you can see from the side, again, it's unspooling the thread as it's going into the machine.
And it's also drawing the thread the way that it was spun onto the spool. And if you don't have a thread stand, sometimes I tell people, if you have that type of spool, one of the hacks I do is like, I put the spool in a cup beside my machine and then I thread it through, because it still kind of draws it in that same similar orientation. And it's not a permanent solution, but it's something if you're in a pinch and you don't have a thread stand with you.
Okay, let's see.
So can I quilt with metallics on the long arm? So absolutely you can. You can definitely throw it on your long arm, your domestic machine, your embroidery machine. That is not a problem at all. Same with what I would recommend with any other machine like embroidery or domestic is I would use a lightweight bobbin, and I would
speed.
Yes, I would slow down my speed. I think especially on a long arm, I would definitely reduce my speed a little bit. So go a little bit slower. It often helps with metallic threads, and you can ramp up once you find your sweet spot. But like go slow to start to make sure that's not the thing that's giving you any issues. But yes, go ahead, put it on the long arm. I think it's really beautiful in quilts to have some metallic.
Yeah, and I would be unafraid of layering as well. We've seen some really beautiful stuff with people actually thread painting with the metallic thread. So you can actually pack this metallic densely together, the 40 weight Spotlite. So you can get really nice and tight and have very good coverage. So that's why it's also great for things like machine embroidery, because you have deco bob in that bottom and then you can have metallic on top, whether you choose to just do some quilting or you're doing something more dense like thread painting.
Yes. Okay, the next question is, can I use metallic threads for hand stitching? I would say if you're going to use a metallic thread like this, it's not like you can't use it, but I would say it doesn't really show up a lot. It's the same as if you just use like your 40 weight embroidery thread to do hand stitching. It's not really going to show up a lot. And for the value of like doing so much because the thread is thinner, I wouldn't say it's as worth. You can, but if you are going to do hand stitching with metallic, I definitely recommend you size up in your thread and use something that's more like our 12 weight GlaMore here, or its sister thread, which is the 8 weight Dazzle. So you can see these threads are definitely a lot heavier. They make it a lot easier for hand work, or if you do hand embroidery. So even if you're doing like fancier stitches like bullions or cast-ons or, you know, all those fun things like that, I would definitely use a heavier weight thread to do that versus your more typical regular metallic thread. And what else was I going to say about this? The number 8 Dazzle is kind of like similar to like a number 8 pearl cotton, which is meant for handwork. So these are fantastic for handwork.
And they come on smaller sizes because you may not need a whole spool like this for handwork. So they are available in these smaller spools. So you can do hand embroidery with them. And so I would say a number to remember is definitely 12 weight. So you can't put Dazzle through the machine like what Calista said. Dazzle actually came first in our lineup, but people really wanted to sew with it.
Yep.
And you can't. So they could only couch or do bobbin work. And then after, that's how GlaMore was born, the 12 weight. So a lot of the colors are actually kind of like sister colors. They come in very, very similar shades. But GlaMore you can put through the eye of the needle into your machine, and you can use it on your long arm, and you can quilt with it as well. A quick tip if you are going to quilt with heavier weight threads is first, of course, increase your needle size, but also increase that stitch length as well. So you can actually have just like more space for that stitch to sit in on top of your quilt or on top of your project. But of course, when it does come to handwork and you want it to be a little bit more showy, I think we would first suggest any of these like heavier weight threads. And then if you're wanting something that's more like machine work or something that's a little bit more dense, then Spotlite is the way to go.
Yes, exactly. Okay, the next question is, do metallic threads need special storage? So it's not like you have to really go out of your way to store the thread. And again, we are kind of talking about similar things. Is I would put kind of like a wrap around the threads, like what we showed you earlier, and that just like prevents the thread from like pooling or unspooling, or like what people were saying, like blossoming. But there's also an added feature that it like prevents the thread from drying out. If you live in like a dry climate like Calgary, sometimes the thread can feel and get a little dry. And like what we would recommend is just to like give it a quick like mist with some water. And the reason is it's kind of like the same as like if you have really frizzy hair that day and you like wet your hands to just kind of like pat that down to get rid of the static so it doesn't like stick to your face. That would be the same thing as like it if it's really dry, then it can get staticky, and like that can make it like less of a good sewing experience.
So we talk about the sewability a lot. So in that dry climate, just like controlling the static will help a lot more with like sewing with it. But for the most part, when it comes to thread storage, you want to treat it the same as your fabric storage as well, right? You don't want to put your fabric just in a spot that's going to get hit with direct sunlight all the time, because sunlight's just going to bleach whatever.
Oh, yes, that too.
Right? It's going to bleach whatever is sitting in front of like your windows and stuff like that. So for a lot of the threads, especially like the ones that are like natural materials like cotton, rayon, but anything in general, if it sits in sun for a long time, the durability of it is going to change. So just store this in a spot that's not in direct sunlight, in a drawer where your thread stands are, or where your thread cabinet or where your shelf might be, and that will be a good place to store it.
Yes.
That's not in direct sunlight.
The next question is, can I wash and iron projects with metallic? Yes, you can wash and iron projects with metallic, but again, I would just go a little bit more gently. So using like a gentle cycle, or sometimes they have the like, you know, those like washer bags, like putting your projects in those. I would also say, like, if you're going to press it, put a pressing cloth or like maybe flip your project upside down and just like iron the back instead of like directly. Just don't put the iron directly on the metallic, I would say.
Yes. And I would also use that as a general rule. Anytime you're using like these heavier weight threads, I love to do hand embroidery. And one thing that I make sure I don't do is ever iron the top of your hand embroidery, because especially for pearl cottons or rounder threads like this, when you iron your stitch, it's going to flatten it, right? It's going to do what an iron's going to do. It's going to flatten your stitch a little bit. So what you can actually do is either lay like a folded towel down or something that's a little bit softer, flip your piece of work so that the front side is on that towel, and just iron the back instead. So your stitch quality will stay the same.
Yes.
It's not going to look like flat on one side, but at least the fabric is all nice and pressed around it.
And I would say, like, if you are going to do it from the front side with a pressing cloth, don't use a super high heat setting. Maybe like a low to medium heat setting is like kind of what I would stick with. Yes. So I think that's all the questions we had today. I didn't see anything else that popped up besides the ones we've answered already. But again, you can always leave questions after this is done too, because we always make sure we go back through and answer anything that might have come up when you guys are watching it later, or if you're just joining us later and not during the live.
Yes. And of course, for those of you that watched throughout today's session, we have a special code for you, and it's only available for starting now. For the next 24-hour period, you get an extra 5% off of the 10%. So 15% off any of our metallic threads. So the code is HHMT5. That's all in capital letters. So HHMT5 in your checkout. You'll get that additional 5% on top of the 10% of the metallic threads. And it's definitely a good time to try any out.
Especially with the holidays.
Yeah, the holidays are coming around. And honestly, like, metallic thread is a bit of an investment. So to take advantage,
I think we actually have something that's like called the Metallic Thread Mastery Bundle.
Yes.
Where it has some of these tools that we talked about, and the needles, and
as a full kit,
and some of the metallic. So it's a great way. It's like a full kit to just kind of like get your hands on it and like try a bunch of like what we talked about today. And we're actually going to be at Houston in 2 weeks' time. So if you guys are planning on going to Houston, please swing by the booth. I think we're in the 400 aisle, something like that.
Yes, come stop by and say hi. We have free make and takes at the booth. But of course, Calista and I are always very happy to come online and answer any questions. We actually really like the Q&A style.
Yeah.
It also helps us like understand what you guys are looking for.
Yeah, let us know if you liked this style. Like, we did a month of these. Like, I don't know if you guys like found it interesting or like want to see more or a different format. It really helps us like make content that you guys like to enjoy as well.
Yeah, if you want to see stitch outs or more explanations on specific techniques, just let us know. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. So you can reach out to us anytime if you have video ideas and you're like, I really would like to see this, or I want to see how this is done. Just let us know. We have a running list. So.
Yes.
Again, thank you everyone so much. Happy Sewing Month.
Yes.
And I hope you feel a little bit inspired by joining our Thread Happy Hour.
Yes. All right. We'll see you guys soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.